Thursday, January 4th, 2024, Ipswich School Committee meeting. We will call to order at 7:03. Apologies for the delay. Jimmy, would you please read the district mission statement for us?
Ipswich Public Schools aspires to empower all students to be global citizens who are effective communicators, analytical problem solvers, and savvy consumers of information. We propose to do this through an emphasis on communication, critical thinking, creativity, self-management, perseverance, and collaboration. Students will be active partners in authentic learning, offering voice and choice and demonstrating competency.
Thank you. For announcements this evening, the next school committee meeting will be held on Thursday, January 18th at 7 p.m. in the middle school high school ensemble room. And the following subcommittees and working groups will meet. FEFI Policy Working Group will meet remotely on Tuesday, January 9th at 5 p.m. The Policy Subcommittee will also meet remotely on Tuesday, January 9th at 6 p.m. The School Facilities Working Group will meet remotely on Wednesday, January 10th at 6 p.m. And the Communications Subcommittee will meet remotely on Thursday, January 11th at 5 p.m. And all of those remote meetings will be posted, the links will be posted on the agendas for those meetings. School and district offices will be closed on Monday, January 15th. Any other announcements tonight? All right, seeing none. Special acknowledgements.
The only thing that I have this evening is the music department. Right before break, which was the last time we were together, were all the concerts, and it just I commented my superintendent's report later on, but our music educators and the students and the talent of everyone is just absolutely amazing. What the kids produce and what our educators are able to pull out of those kids is just simply amazing. And now that we can record and broadcast streaming all of our concerts, it's like a worldwide audience. So people are watching from all over the place. Our concerts, New Jersey, my family down there is watching them and commenting on them. So, and I'm sure that's happening all over. So it's just a shout out to the entire music department.
Any other special acknowledgements? Okay. Remarks from the chair. I actually don't have any this meeting. I was with school break, and then I had COVID before that and missed a meeting. So thanks to Jeff for stepping in, but I don't have any comments in particular this evening. Public comment. Do we have any public comments this evening? All right. Moving on. Yeah. High school student representative report. Jimmy. Oh, sorry.
No, Alicia, you can get set up.
Yeah,
Go
you
ahead.
can get set up.
That's fine. So I didn't stop you.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, so tonight I just wanted to touch upon like the coffee and comments event that the advisory council held on the 22nd, right before break. So that event, the advisory council was donated by the Duncan and Essex and Ipswich. They donated it was 3 or 4 dozen donuts, and then the rest was purchased by the student members. So we were giving out donuts to students who filled out a Google form that just asked like, oh, okay, what are your thoughts, or what's on your mind type thing, to kind of get feedback, either positive, negative, what's going on in schools. And this year we actually gotten over 120 digital responses. We had Charlie Quimby thought of having paper as well in case the form crashed, which it did, but luckily we had the paper ones, which we haven't looked through yet. And I don't have like specific responses to talk about tonight, just because tomorrow is actually our advisory council meeting. So that's where we're going to kind of digest the responses and take a deeper look and kind of question, okay, why are we getting this response? What could be changed? What kind of, before we start announcing and just giving the raw data, kind of think of why. And we also asked about the grade level, because we're trying to see if there's any, like there's a common theme, like, okay, so multiple freshmen said this, but that was not responded by the sophomores or juniors, seniors. So that data will be interesting to look at. And at the next meeting, I'll kind of report a little bit deeper on that. And with that form, we're leaving it open. So it's in the bio of the advisory council Instagram. And we're going to do something else later on in the year to kind of make sure people know about it and kind of keep active on that. So that's the plan with that. And that's really all for my student report, kind of similar to you. We had break and everything, so I need
Right.
a
Okay,
little
great.
more time to.
Jamie, how many people, great job. I think that's a lot more people that you got involved. How many people were involved last time that submitted the,
Like 50 or 60, so over
that's-
double. Yeah,
that's great, donuts.
yeah,
Food.
yeah,
Yeah. it's
That's
good.
like 20% of the
yeah.
school
So,
population if
yeah.
it's 100 kids. Great.
How's your social media account been doing?
It's okay.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot going on at first, and then we haven't posted anything since that event. But once we start to get these responses and kind of talk about it, there'll be more to report on. We're trying to post after every meeting. Just, okay, here's what we talked about. So students kind of are aware that these meetings are happening and their responses are being talked about, or their comments are not just going nowhere. There's actually a reason and they're getting somewhere. So that's the hope. So.
Great, thank you. All right, so now we have our IEA snapshot presentation on teaching executive function by Alicia Thomas.
Thomas. I am a fourth grade special ed co-teacher at the Winthrop School and wanted to talk to you a little bit about teaching executive functioning skills in an elementary classroom. And so obviously you all know that we teach based on the Massachusetts state standards. In fourth grade, there are about 170 standards and substandards that we should cover within the school year. And they cover all kinds of different subjects in general. But the part that's not covered by the standards are all the skills that are required of students to be able to even access any of the learning that we need to have. And those are things that we don't have curriculum necessarily to teach, but are necessary in order for kids to be able to access all of the learning. So oftentimes these are things that teachers go and get professional development on our own, or we make materials up to be able to teach students these skills. And so one of those skills is executive functioning, and it's actually a set of skills that we all use in everyday life to manage life and that students need to be able to be successful in school. And they help us, these skills help us set goals, make a plan, execute the plan, and in general, just be productive and get anything done. And include such things like working memory and self-control, flexible thinking, organization, self-monitoring, encompasses a lot. It's a lot of really a lot of different pieces that are moving within executive functioning. So first off is that we need to identify that that's a need within our classroom, which every single year it is, for different subsets of groups or maybe the entire class, depending on the year. And so students who have trouble with executive functioning struggle with task initiation, multi-step directions, prioritizing, organizing their materials, whether in their space or just materials they need to be able to do a task, managing time, and just planning anything in general. In general, executive functioning, students who struggle with executive functioning or people that struggle with executive functioning can't create a picture of what the end product is going to look like. So because they don't have a picture of, for example, what it looks like to be ready to leave school and go home, they can't plan out what they need to do to be able to go from student sitting at desk to student walking out the door, because they don't have that picture. So if they don't have that picture, you can't plan, or even if they do have that picture, maybe they can't plan out, I have to go get my backpack and all the steps that are associated with that. And that also comes into play when you're trying to move around the classroom. So in the class, that might look like wandering the room when you transition from the rug space to your desk. The students sometimes just lap the room, or they walk in the room at the beginning of the day and they don't unpack and they just walk around with their coat and their backpack on. Inability to organize their spaces, like their desk. Difficulty packing up at the end of the day, or an inefficient use of time. By the time they get themselves settled and they have all the materials they need, that work time is gone, and now they don't have time to do the academic task, or as much time. So previous to some of the work that we did with executive functioning, we were doing things like making a checklist for kids to be able to go through, or frequent teacher reminders. But what we found was that required an adult to tell the kid what to do. And they weren't necessarily learning the skill. They needed another person to help them to still do those things. So, as usual, we found a solution. And Margaret Medeiros, who was the elementary program manager at Winthrop, and Alyssa Brand, who is the counterpart at Doyon, wrote multiple grants to bring Sarah Ward, who is an expert in executive functioning, to Ipswich. And so this was a phased plan with multiple grants. And their idea for phasing it was so that all elementary staff could get access to this professional development and the language that were associated with teaching executive functioning. So we started with special ed staff and then moved to RBTs and therapists. Sarah Ward came in and did consult times with special education staff in both buildings. So she could come in and observe our class, observe a student, we could talk with her about things that were working that we had implemented from the training the year before. And she would help us troubleshoot. And then in the 2021 year, all regular education staff and specialists were also trained and did PD with her. So I'm a special education teacher, but you don't have to be a student who has an IEP to be able to get this kind of instruction. So because this was phased with the PD, any staff member can follow up when follow through or initiate any of these strategies. It just depends on student need. So what are some of them? One example that she used with us, so she gave us a strategy called feature blocking. And so we talked about how executive functioning students or people don't have the image of what the end product looks like. So one thing you can do is called feature blocking, where you print a picture of the actual student standing at the end of the day, for example, with their backpack on and carrying all of their things. This is not an Ipswich student, it's an ad for backpack. But you would do the same thing. You would block off the backpack, you would block off the lunchbox, and then you would print that picture. And the teacher would say to the student, it's time to go home. Tell me your plan to match this picture. Ideally, you would want them to have the picture in their mind eventually, but that's where you're starting. You're doing your own picture. And then they would walk through and tell you all of those steps. The same thing is true about a desk. A student who has trouble organizing their desk, if you tell them to clean their desk, the first thing they do is dump the entire desk on the floor, and then they don't know how to put the desk back together. So you would feature block the desk. So you would say, oh, there's folders that are on the left side. On top of that are smaller notebooks, and then your independent reading books are here with your pencil pouch. Another strategy we use primarily in the older grades is something called the Get Ready, Do Done board. Many of us have these hanging in the front of our rooms, but they can also be printed on a paper to do individually to the student. And again, this goes to the idea that they don't know what the finished task looks like. So you walk through the steps of planning that task. And it's all done with visuals. So in my room, this is a magnet board that's in the front of the room. So if after you gave the instruction, kids have to go and do their independent math sheet. So you would say, all right, what does it look like to be finished? And students would help to create this board. So they would say, oh, we have a worksheet. It has our name and the date on the front of the worksheet. When we're finished with it, we put it in our classwork bin. And so the classwork bin goes out there. And when you're done, we want you to take out a book and read. What do we need to do to finish that task? Well, first, get a worksheet from the front of the table, gather up our supplies, choose a quiet workspace, complete the front and the back of the worksheet, and then pass the work in. What do we need to get together? What materials do we need to do this successfully? Well, we need the worksheet. We're going to need a pencil. We need our multiplication grid and a clipboard if we're not working at our desk. Sometimes you get stuck. What are you going to do if you get stuck? Oftentimes these students would normally just sit there and not know what to do. So you're telling them when you get stuck, you're going to look around. What are you going to look at? And you're going to have students point to different resources. That could be their notebook where there's an example problem, an anchor chart, the board if there's an example still there. And then you could also check in with a friend. And so then now the plan is there. And so then students, you say, okay, go ahead. And then they know exactly what they're getting ready. Oftentimes when this is hanging in the front of the room, we don't get many questions because kids then know, oh, this is the resource. Like they don't say, all right, I'm done, now what? They know what to do. The last and final step is that we have a clock at the front of the room that has a plastic overlay. So we take a whiteboard marker and we'll highlight like, oh, it's 10 o'clock. We're having 40 minutes for this task. And we highlight the clock. So as the time passes, they can see that, how much time they have left to finish the task and how much time has been spent. So there's just a couple of the strategies that we learned through the grant fund with Sarah Wood. Any questions?
I don't have a question. I've worked with you before, and the detail that you, all the teachers, are able to teach their students the academics, but also see what child needs this system or that system. It's amazing, and I hope that you get enough credit for your observations, because personally, it helped my family member do so much better, and so thank you personally.
And I think that that's something that we as Ipswich educators are really good at, that we notice when we do any kind of professional development, is we're thinking with the student in mind, and we go right back and apply all of these strategies.
What outcome have you experienced, maybe not yet, when they get to middle school?
Well, what we noticed even just through a fourth grade year, the beginning of our fourth grade year this year, for example, we were doing get ready, do done boards before we did anything independent. And now we're to the point where it's just when it's a really complicated or new kind of a system. So you do notice pretty quickly that kids will start to integrate some of this on their own, or if not, and kids are kind of floundering, because we have the paper copy of the board, we're easily able to sit, okay, you look a little bit confused, and they can start to plan through that themselves. So we notice that there is kind of like a gradual release of that, or kids that maybe had the get ready, do done board in their third grade classroom, then come into fourth grade and see it, and they're like, oh, okay, yep, nope, I know what to do now. And just seeing that board is enough. So I would assume the carryover is similar to middle school.
So is this implemented in fourth grade, and or earlier?
Everyone has the training through Sarah Ward from the grants.
Okay.
And so today we had a second grade teacher that was making her get ready, do done board
Okay.
for some of the complex tasks that they're doing in second grade. Obviously, executive functioning looks different
Right,
for kindergartner than it
Right.
does, for upper elementary. But
right. But it's always on the
everybody has
radar of the
access.
teacher
Yeah.
Anecdotally, are you noticing that there's more kids in need of these kinds of services, or? Yeah,
I think it depends on the year. Not to get it, of course, with the whole COVID thing, but I think that it's very much there. And the current fourth graders were kindergartners. And I think that it was hard for them to figure out how to manage things on their own and learn those executive functioning skills, with parents at home trying to juggle everything, themselves. And so they weren't necessarily learning the same level of independence, because you were home and you're trying to, like, I've got a meeting here you go, here's your pencil, here's your things, you need to get ready for math, kind of thing.
interesting.
And the kids were home alone often, or just with a sibling, and not surrounded by 18 other.
I mean, it's definitely something that all kids need to work on, and it's nice to be able to have a structure.
Sure, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This is great.
Next up, I'm going to introduce Vicki Holman, who is our water and wastewater director. I'm going to introduce the rest of the folks while I set this up for her.
So I'm Vicki Hellman, Water and Wastewater Director for the town. With me tonight is Rachel Blattis-Fuller. She is our Water Resources Manager. The wastewater department has a proposed project to relocate our town water sewer pumping station to the town hall parcel, which is controlled by the school department. So we are here tonight to request permission to conduct some soil borings on that site to determine if that site is in fact suitable for the construction of that station. Now, Rachel is here with a presentation so that she can kind of overview the project, why we're here, why this is even an idea, and what it's all about, and then we're happy to answer any questions. Rachel, take it away.
Don't worry about that. It's just up there.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here with you today, especially if you haven't seen us do a talk before. As he said, I think Rachel and I do lots of our conservation programming, the police department. And I'm just going to run through some slides today about the project. Hopefully you have heard about it before. We've been talking about it in public for several years now. But I did want to give you some information and talk a little bit more about the testing site to conduct
You all know the town wharf. It's sort of an iconic Ipswich location. If you didn't know, we do have our main pump station for the town.
Could you just move the microphone a
I'm
bit
so
closer
sorry.
to your face? It's for the people at home, so it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like you're. like you
Okay,
need
is
it-
that better?
Watching on the.
Sorry. Thank you. So if you didn't know, our main pump station is located at the town wharf, that little brick building that you've probably driven by or parked next to 100 times. And a pump station is a facility that actually moves our wastewater to our water treatment plant over on Fowler's Lane. And that particular pump station actually handles all of the municipal wastewater in the entire town. So it's one of our most critical pieces of wastewater infrastructure. It's over 60 years old, and obviously it's on the wharf. So it's pretty critical to the storm surge and flooding related issues regarding climate change. So we've been engaging in efforts for a long time to sort of address these concerns concerning the location of the pump station. We'd like to move the pump station, and I'll again go into a little bit more about why. It's a rather expensive project, about $22 million, and we've been aggressively pursuing grant funds for years now to try and support that. At town meeting, we did get $7.2 million towards that project, and I'll just show you a little bit more about some of the concerns that we have. I should also mention we did receive this last year, $235,000 from Mass EEA and Energy and Environmental Affairs to start the permitting and design process and also do some community engagement, which we've partially done with your sustainability class, which has been really lovely so far. So here's the pump station. We have some visualizations up on the screen, if you can kind of see that. That top line is the 100-year flood plus 3-foot elevation. So in any given year, a 100-year flood has a 1% chance of happening. So if that were to happen, plus that 3 feet buffer we use for engineering projects, the pump station has a chance of inundating. And that's a really big deal because we actually have 20 feet that's below grade of that pump station of mechanical equipment. And if that failed, essentially that would potentially cause a sewage backup into all of the homes and businesses that are connected to our wastewater system. So it's beyond its useful life as a facility, and the impacts of it failing are pretty catastrophic. We have over 4,500 people who would be impacted by that on the residential side, over 275 businesses on the commercial side who would be directly impacted by that. And of course, we can't even begin to imagine the ecological damage that would occur if sewage were to back up into the river and into the homes and businesses that are connected to it. So also the town wharf is an epicenter of commercial and recreational fishing, boating. It's sort of how we get on the water in Ipswich. So we want to protect it from multiple fronts and multiple facets. So what do we do about it? As I said before, we are hoping to relocate that particular piece of infrastructure. That's the best case scenario, being able to completely rebuild it somewhere else. In that case, there would still be a small pump station there, but it would be retrofitted to be way more resilient to climate change. That is very dependent on whether or not we get the funding that we're hoping that we get from the funding organizations that we've applied to. So that's not for certain that that's happening yet. The other option would be rebuilding the pump station, so it would still exist there. It would be retrofitted again to be more resilient, but we really believe that the best case scenario is removing that major piece of wastewater infrastructure from the wharf, which is so close to the marsh and the river system. So our consultants, Ty and Bond, did identify this particular location on school property as a potentially suitable site for the new pump station. And so we are here today not to ask permission to put it there. We're not there yet. We want to continue our investigation and, as Vicki said, conduct some bore drillings to test the suitability, to see what's sort of underneath, to make sure that it's appropriate site for us to move forward. And before we would do that, we would come and sit down with you and have a more lengthy discussion about what we're requesting from you. So like I said today, we just want to sort of conduct those tests and get your permission to do that, to assess some of the geological aspects of the site. Obviously, it's right on the riverbank there. We already have wastewater infrastructure on like kind of underneath the river walk. Part of what we might do is use some nature-based solutions that are already we've already done actually on the river walk, the biostabilization area, to sort of make sure that the riverbank there is stabilized if we get into any construction. So just a little bit more about that location. Essentially, it was identified primarily because it's far away from that flood elevation line that we want to avoid in a storm event, and very close again to our existing wastewater infrastructure. So that's a very, very high level overview of the project. Obviously, it's extremely complex. And Vicki and I would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have about exactly what we're asking moving forward or about the project overall.
So for the purposes of the school committee this evening, you're simply asking, if I understand this correctly from my conversation with Vicki, to be able to go onto the property and conduct the test borings. That's all we're looking for at this point. It's not permission to build it there or anything like that. It's just to do the borings. Okay.
Is there a cost that we would need to know about, or that's covered under your
That's entirely borne
Okay.
by the wastewater department, this whole endeavor of exploring and designing and all this process and even the legal work, should we get into it, to work through property ownership requirements and permissions formally for construction. That's down the line, that's all borne on the wastewater.
Is this the only spot in Ipswich that you guys have started to explore, or are there other ones around as well?
We did originally look to just rehab the station in its current location, and then we started seeking out federal funding for it, and it started to become obvious that it seemed like a poor choice to rebuild something in the floodplain. So the interesting thing is the sewer system is predominantly gravity for the most part, so everything's flowing downhill, so the river area is the lowest point in the community to receive the wastewater. And so we really did focus on this town hall location because of the bluff, because we're still at this, proximity to the river, and we have all this infrastructure. The green shading on the plan there is actually an interceptor, which is very large sewer pipe that's collecting everything. So siting a station adjacent to the interceptor is critical because it captures the majority of the wastewater that we're already collecting. So we really we're looking for sites along there, and this is really the only identifiable site that we found that had the elevated perch that it's up there. So it really is the only site that we've investigated to this level.
Thank you for coming and giving us this presentation. It's helpful. Do people have questions, other questions? Jeff, concerns?
Yeah, when would it take place, and is there any other approval beyond ours that you need before you can proceed?
Yes, we do need Conservation Commission approval, and we are expecting to, I think they have a February 7th, I think is the commission meeting that we were hoping to attend there. So we wanted to come here first, hopefully gain your approval for that, then have Conservation Commission approval, and actually hope to do the borings in February.
Just for the purpose of the borings, they're only for structural composition of the soil, and they're not looking for environmental hazards or contamination.
They will tell us all of that, right? So the point is to understand what is beneath these two sites, or that there's two kind of possible locations for the station on this site that are ideal for us. And so we'll look at both those locations. Predominantly, we're looking at the ledge. That's a big rock, basically, there. So how shallow is the ledge? And what else is there? Are we encountering anything else? So they're going to bore down to refusal and beyond, depending on how shallow that refusal is, which is going to hit rock. And so they'll identify whatever is in that column that gets drilled. And if it becomes evident, I've heard some stories about some things happening in that area, we'll address that as we learn what we see in borings.
And so I think it's slide 9. It's hard to see on the laptop, but are the blue marks, those are the boring locations?
Correct.
And so I think part of the those stories or folklore or actual history of kind of what's happened at that site before, there's been a reluctancy to want to investigate that because once you look, you own it. Is that true? Are we creating a potential, we know there's a problem there, school committee, you're now responsible, you're near the river, there's a chance that these are gonna leak, you need to do something about it?
I think that's a good question. I don't want to say that would never happen. It's not my estimation. If we found something that's suited, we just take it forward and build it. I can follow up with possibly on that issue to see if that's a line.
But I think that's something that we've just, even prior to my time, that has sort of been a reaction to maybe not wanting to look at this site. So I think maybe we would want to know, is there a potential liability based on what's found there? You know, if it's on a private site, I assume a homeowner then has liability. What happens if it's on a municipal site? You know.
So that said, do we want to wait for that answer or do we want to authorize this? What's your timeline?
Or are there other questions that any members of the school committee have? And then we can work with town council on that issue. You said that you're going before planning, Conservation Commission?
February, early February.
Okay, so we have another school committee meeting in a couple of weeks that
Yeah.
we could,
If we need some
we
answers.
need to,
I mean, it's a big site and, I don't know if we can get any more information on the specifics of where said activities occurred on that site, because this is, tucked away in the corner, and I don't know if we have any more detail on that back from the past that we could dig up.
Back when we were looking at the historic project documents, there were a couple of plans that showed areas where there had been historic printing present, heavy metal concerns. Maybe somewhere else there had been a leak. Those are closer to the annex and the existing town hall location. But then there had just been these stories of cars and mattresses and whatever else is in there. And I don't think anybody knows. And so I guess I'm curious as to what is the potential repercussions of finding something that is considered environmentally dangerous or hazardous. Then what would that entail and whose responsibility would it be to address it?
In general, how does the committee feel? I mean, in general, I'm supportive of this, this project. I see the need and I don't have an issue with it being on this property. So I'd tend to support it, but I do have those concerns that Jeff has about the potential liability of what's found in those borings.
Same, agree with that.
I agree. It seems like we have general consensus for the project overall. We just kind of want to get those questions answered. And then hopefully by our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight, we should be able to.
I can bring that information back.
Yeah.
I don't think Vicky.
Yeah, I
needs
don't
to
think
come
you would
back.
need to come back and present it anymore. Yeah, we can get the answers, questions answered. Yeah, and then put it back on our agenda. But it seems in general like there's pretty good support for it.
And if there's any questions that come up.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next up, school bus electrification project. This is an exciting initiative. We have our town's new climate resiliency manager, Rick Mitchell, here with us tonight. I don't know, do you want to give a background on this, Rick, or do you want me to, or Tom? We all can. Yeah.
Both of us can.
Yeah.
So this is a, sit down so my- these are conversations that have been happening for a few years now with Salter Transportation, and you'll hear the name Beacon mentioned tonight in our conversation. And Beacon is the parent company of our local Salter Transportation provider. So we initiated conversations, I want to say 2 years ago at least, with them, with the prior climate resiliency manager in town. Had some initial conversations when these types of grants were first coming out. there was lots of money available, but it was mainly for the larger cities, and we weren't eligible for any of those early grants. And so it kind of took a back seat for a while. And now with new rounds of federal funding coming out, and a new climate resiliency manager, Rick Mitchell, we're starting the conversations again. So Rick has been on board a couple of months now, has had a couple of conversations, and I've been involved with some conversations with them as well, the Salter Transportation Beacon. And so we're at a point now where they're ready to apply for some grants. And I know that Tom Markham jumped on a call with Beacon and Rick last week to talk about moving the whole project, a project of sorts, forward. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Thank you. Good background. As he said, my name's Rick Mitchell. I'm the new Climate Resiliency Manager, have been on board since the end of October. And as Brian indicated, immediately picked up on the previous discussions regarding electrification of the Salter buses serving Ipswich as part of the greenhouse gas reduction. But it's certainly appropriate. We're talking about climate resiliency and moving the pumping station. Well, that's the result of global warming. We're working on the other end, trying to reduce greenhouse gases. And one of those elements is school buses and the entire municipal fleet. This is really being driven by EPA, which has $500 million available for the electrification of school buses. And those grants are being given to school districts and third-party vendors who serve those school districts. The monies are competitive. It's going to be a national competition. The incentives that are available are up to $200,000 per bus, with up to 25 buses. An application can have a grant request for up to 25 electric buses. Electric buses, I'm told, are running about $300,000 to $350,000, which is about 10 times the current, I guess, around 10 times the current cost of a fossil fuel vehicle. So we've been working with Beacon Mobility and their Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy. We've had some very productive discussions. I learned a lot in that discussion that Tom was on, that they had bought last year a number of electric vehicles and have been testing them to try and find out, are they viable? Do they work? What kind of mileage do they get? What kind of charging infrastructure do they need? Training the drivers on learning about how to handle an electric bus and the charging and actually connecting the buses at the end of the day, and looking actually to use those buses as a potential peak shaving when the buses are not being used, feeding the electricity back into the grid. So they're pretty well versed on this. So I've been working with them on submitting an application to include the buses that serve the town of Ipswich. And I believe it's either 10 or 12 buses. I don't have that exact number. So we've also been talking about the potential of locating electric bus depot in the town of Ipswich. And the benefit to Beacon Mobility, who is the parent of Salter, is that Ipswich Electric has lower electric rates than the investor-owned utilities. And it's sort of centrally located because the Salter serves 10 other communities or surrounding communities. We don't know where that's going, but we thought we'd have that discussion, maybe leverage our ability to provide some benefit to them to get more electric buses. So tonight I'm here asking for the school committee to approve 3 documents that are required to go with the application. One is a school board awareness letter. Basically, it just says, we, the school board, are aware that that Salter is applying for these funds. The second is a third-party approval letter, because they are the third party. The town is not applying and the school district is not applying. So it's just saying we approve that the third party is applying for these funds. And the other is a utility partnership approval letter that just says we will be working with, Salter will be working with their utility. And so that's really it, the three things. There's no obligation here. There's no cost to the town. It's just, these are the forms that have to be submitted with a grant application. So that's a quick overview of what's going on. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. One of the topics that I brought back from the convention that I attended was the idea, as Worcester has purchased their own buses and have hired bus drivers hired through the school system or the town. Is this something that could, I don't know what the feelings are about that because I just mentioned it and we moved on, but is this a grant that can be used to purchase town vehicles, or is this an investment that we would be putting into Salter, that if we did change our mind and want to own our own buses, would that, I don't say be a conflict, but could we still do that? Apply for this grant, and then at some point, if we decided to purchase our own buses, we could do that.
That's a great question. This particular grant is, and the application of it isn't locking us in.
Okay, that was my question. Yeah.
To Salter.
Okay.
We currently have a 3-year contract with Salter and 2 1-year extension options, which we'll be bringing back to you at the next school committee meeting to vote on, because this is the 3rd year of the contract. Anecdotally, I have experience working in districts that own their own buses.
Really?
And it does have its benefits,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of drawbacks because
Yeah.
it grossly increases your budget. Our budget would be much higher,
Right.
I think, than
Yeah, because we need a
it is
staff
with our contract.
just for that.
The staffing pattern
Mhm.
for it, I mean, Salter has a tough time now getting drivers.
Right.
And then we would have to hire a bus coordinator
Right.
for our district.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of drawbacks to it,
Yeah.
and these electric buses, as Rick said, are much more expensive than a diesel bus.
Right.
And so that's all added costs. Now, the grant is up to $200,000 a bus, but the buses cost like $400,000, right? 4 and change, give or take.
Right.
So even if Salter's purchasing them with the grant money, then they're going to own the buses, and I don't know if they're going to pass those charges along to us in the form of, or look for extended contracts. I don't know how that will work. I think that's all part of the discussions that have to happen yet. But tonight, we're just simply looking to allow Salter to apply for these grants. We don't know, as Rick said, that it's a national competition for the funding, so.
Right, and that the whole discussion is the length of the contract, and I think, Tom, we were discussing that, and they don't even know. They were talking about maybe up to 5 years to recoup their sunk costs that they would be incurring. So it's all in flux. The applications are due the end of this month. The awards will be made in April. Even if they were successful, it's a 12 to 18 month backlog to order those buses and have them delivered because we just haven't built the infrastructure yet to manufacture in mass school buses or electric vehicles in general. So this will be an evolving discussion. And the other thing is that the woman Manu Argowell, who we were talking with, Vice President of Strategic Development, is we're talking about a plan B. If they're not successful, what's the next option for electrification of the fleet? So everything's in flux, and we just thought it was smart. Jump on this money, make Ipswich. I don't think they've got any other community yet signed up to do this. My goal is to make Ipswich #1 in line. If they are successful, that we get some or all of the buses electrified. So at least we can take credit for the greenhouse gas reduction because we've set very ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas in Ipswich from municipal operations. And I'm going to take it right from there.
Tom, I don't know if you want to add to.
I did, yeah, thanks. Just to follow up on what Rick was saying and the conversation we had with Salter and Beacon, I think it would be more than fair to say as a contractual obligation that if Salter in this application were to come through, they would expect a longer term relationship with us. That if they're going to expend, call it 50% of their own resources to buy buses on Ipswich behalf, they're going to have an expectation that we're going to be around for longer than, another year extension. They were talking about a 5 to 7 year, obligation. Now we'll have to negotiate that. That would have to be approved here because it's longer than a traditional contract. It would have to go to town meeting. So there's lots of steps involved in approving that. But I think it's very fair to say that if this were to be successful and Salter were to make that type of investment, they would expect a longer term relationship with us. And that would probably be a fair thing to do, to make.
EPA, the grant requires those buses be on the road for at least 5 years.
That's right, yeah.
So
They have to be in service and in use.
they want to
for
see
the-
their
from the feds.
money used
Right. Yeah.
for long-term impact.
And typically, even with the diesel buses now, we put in the contract how many years they're allowed to be on the road. So there is language in existing contracts so that we're not putting kids on buses that are too old, basically. It's for our kids' safety.
And there's a timeliness piece, which is why this is coming up now and why we had a meeting a couple weeks ago. Because the deadline, the grant application deadline is the end of January, January 31st, I think it actually is. So there's lots of moving parts between what Rick is juggling, but we're certainly at the very beginning of the dominoes as they need to fall.
So hopefully you can approve whoever the signing authority is for those 3 pieces of application. And then that will come to me and I will forward that to them and off we go and we'll see what happens. And, we'll be in the front of the line, at least from cities and towns on the North Shore. Thank you.
I have a couple other questions, sorry if you don't mind. So just to clarify, we're not actually applying for grants, it's a rebate program, right? So we're applying for rebates.
The school committee is not applying.
Well, Beacon, yeah.
Salter, we're just saying to Salter, we are aware that you are applying for this. We acknowledge that you're applying for it as a third party that serves the town. And that's all that's required. That's all they require.
Yeah.
I think to your question specifically, it is actually a rebate.
Yeah.
So Salter would have to buy the bus at,
And
say, the
get
$400,000. And then upon demonstration of the bus being purchased and in use, they would get
money
get
back.
the grant money. They would get the rebate in the form of a grant back.
Which is kind
It's
of
not
technicality, but
upfront. It's an after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make
Like a
sure
reimbursement.
people are aware
Yes.
of that.
Yep. Fair
And
enough.
then you had answered some of my questions. I'm glad to hear that Beacon is piloting some buses and doing a lot of the legwork. I was a little worried that they jumped on this because we called them But it sounds like they're doing a lot of this prep work anyways, which it seems like is really important because it's not just swapping out a bus for a bus. I mean, you have to train people and it's the infrastructure and it's a complicated transition. So I'm glad to hear that they're doing a lot of that anyways.
Yep, and they are a larger company, and they do have operations in other parts of the country, and they've employed a third-party consultant that works all over the world on electrification.
Okay.
So I think they have a leg up.
Yeah.
And we'll also, I'm working with the congressional delegation. They were already aware that we're doing this. So when the application goes in, we're going to, ask that our congressional delegation write letters of support. So we'll do everything we can to, try and bring home the bacon in terms of that.
Great. One other question was, can you talk a little bit about our ELD and their involvement, and they're on board and are well aware of this, or not quite yet? They're a big piece of the equation.
They're aware of the discussions. We haven't, gotten into any level of detail because we haven't gotten to any level of depth on potentially locating a bus depot here. I spent a lot of my day today working internally with our graphic information system specialist to identify a piece of property that might be available. There's one, and it's 6.5 acres on Route 1. That we've raised that was raised before I was here. That was part of the discussion. Would it influence their decision making in terms of giving us more consideration? It's in part of the discussion. I have no idea where that's going. They have another existing facility, but it's not electrified in Newbury, so they could potentially just upgrade that facility. We're just, as I said, there are a lot of pieces in motion here, and we want to try and figure out, are there ways to negotiate something that's really beneficial to the town, that works for both parties. So
the previous ELD director was involved in the initial conversations with Salter. He was at the table. In fact, I think it was him who came up with that piece of property when he was looking, doing what you're doing.
Right.
Other questions?
Yeah, if it's a federal rebate and goes to the private company, why is approval required from the school committee?
Because they want to make sure that the school district that the third party is serving is aware of what's going on, and they approve what's going on.
So like Salter's not applying, getting this money, and then forcing electric buses on us that we don't know are coming. So I think, it's just awareness.
Yeah, and the other thing, I don't want to bore you with the details. We were talking about that the total price is pretty expensive for those, but there are some serious federal tax incentives and state rebates. So once new term I learned, pancake incentives on top of each other, they can actually get about $350,000, $360,000 if they get the EPA grant. So it does reduce the cost for them down to something that's pretty reasonable. So that's, I think, why they were talking 5 to 7 years as opposed to something larger. So our role is to stay aware, on top of the facts, watch what's going on. If it moves forward, negotiate from a point of strength.
Okay, so we have three, thank you, Rick. We have three forms in our folder tonight that we are looking to vote to authorize be submitted on our behalf. It's the school board awareness certification, the school district approval letter for third-party applicants, and there's an electric utility partnership template. So those are all sort of pre-filled out.
Yes.
So
The template is just the template, though, it's blank.
No, they're completed in your folder. I filled them out appropriately.
which template?
The first one is empty.
This is the 8-page
Blank
one.
in there?
Oh, well, the first one you might be looking at, what our position is on page 7. The first one you're looking at is the electric utility partnership.
Yep.
You go to page 7 is where it was with the authorization from the school committee. And that would be filled out.
So we only have utility company number 1, which is the ELD.
Correct.
And then there's a bunch of other utility companies that don't need to be filled out.
So this form effectively starts with us, and then we'll go to the utility department through Mr. Mitchell and they will fill out the rest of the form for the utility partnership.
I think I'm fine with that one. It's just that it might be the third one, the rebates program electric utility partnership template, where it talks about fleet information, utility information is filled in, but none of the fleet and the dollars are filled in. So are we just approving the template?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what we're effectively approving is to proceed, that we have been informed that we have helped to initiate this as a climate resiliency goal for the town that the school district supports. And we are prepared to work with the town and our vendor in making this application.
So any further discussion? I can attempt a motion.
Are we going to vote on all 3 at once or individually?
I think we can probably vote on all 3 at once.
I think so.
Okay.
All three are needed, so if
Right.
you
Might as well do
vote
it.
on 2 and deny 1, it's really stopping the
Yeah.
bus, if you will.
All right. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve moving forward with approving, Laura's not here. Who's taking our notes tonight?
I can,
Okay.
or we'll do them tomorrow.
Need Laura to help me with my motions. I should have pre-written this. So motion to approve moving forward with Beacon Mobility applying on our behalf for the Clean School Bus program. I don't know. Does that work? Is that enough?
And authorizing.
And authorizing the school board awareness certification, school district approval letter for third-party applicants, and electric utility partnership template forms be submitted on our behalf.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Longest motion ever. All in favor? 7-0. Great. Thank you very much, Rick, for the
Thank you.
background. And just to say, as a member of the Climate Resiliency Committee, it is great to have you on board, and you have gotten a lot done in the last couple months. You have a lot of balls in the air, and it's great to see things moving quickly in this, but in other areas too.
A lot of fun. There's a lot of state and federal money up there on the plate. So it's like a kid in Halloween going, okay, grab as much as we can, fast as we can. So it's a great time to be here.
Yeah, you're being really strategic and trying to take advantage of opportunities that are in front of us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
I'll sign those so that I can.
Okay, so moving on, MSBA decision discussion. I'll be right there.
While you're signing, so as everyone has heard by now, we received word before vacation, the week before school break, that we were not invited into the MSBA process. In a courtesy phone call that I had with MSBA prior to the announcement, they indicated that our SOIs were solid. There wasn't anything wrong with them, but there were simply more needy districts moving forward in the process this year based on the needs of their buildings. I was told that there was one school, in fact, on the list that had to be closed and because it was in such rough shape. So that's where we are. It was reported out in my weekly message back then. It was in the newspaper as well. And so now I think our discussion is just, okay, so now what?
And we had to close one day too, just for the record. I'm sure you were right.
I'm sorry?
We had to close one day too, just
We
for the
did,
record.
right.
Yeah, so thank you for that intro. Yeah, so the SOI submission period opens in the next 10 days. So we're sort of up at it again. It's open until April. Obviously, our need is still there, and so I'm say we resubmit, but we do need to have some conversations about what needs to get added. To the SOIs this round, there was a huge lift, largely by Diana and Jen and Dr. Blake, mostly by Diana, really helping. So I think the SOIs were in great shape, and so I don't think it was anything we didn't have. I think it was just, it's sort of who you're up against when it comes down to it, and we didn't have enough compared to the other districts that applied. So, so I think the issue for me is, what do we need to do, and then which group, which subset of us is going to be responsible for starting that, starting looking at those SOIs and what needs to be done to resubmit. I would propose that it's the school facilities working group sort of start those discussions, and then, we have the discussions as a bigger group. But I'm happy to hear what other people think about next steps.
I just have like a general question. So if there are schools that are closing, how does Ipswich ever have a chance at getting this funding? Like, what are we up against? Is it always going to be, at one point, are we going to get to is it going to get too late? Like, I would hate to see that happen where our schools are crumbling and we're not getting the funding. Like, are there other options that we're probably already doing them, but.
Yeah, I mean,
at some point.
what did you say?
Self-funding. I mean, that's what other districts have had to do.
Self-funding's
Like
an
Lincoln.
option.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty unusual that districts are closing, and I am encouraged. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I do know the percentage of SOIs that have been accepted over the years have, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is somewhere like in the low 20% of.
Okay.
And this year, I think it was close to 30% of applications got accepted, which is, you're dealing with college admissions right now too. It's a numbers game, but that percentage is higher than it has been in the past. And the state budget included quite a bit more money to MSBA, which
so there's more.
Which is partially getting eaten up by construction costs and everything else. But
okay, no, that's good.
We do have good state support. So I think the money, I think we're going in the right direction, and we just need to keep applying. But we can't do it forever. I don't think it's like lots of schools are closing.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we were accepted. We have been accepted. Obviously. So it is. They have deemed us in need.
I think the problem is COVID shined a big spotlight on facilities, particularly movement of air, and everyone started kind of looking very closely at their buildings. And so I think it might not be as easy a path as it was before, just because I think so many people all of a sudden said, we've been kicking this can down the road for a while. And so that's my only concern, but we can't do anything about that concern beyond keep pushing,
I'm also concerned that as time goes on, we have to make repairs to these buildings. We just put a brand new boiler in Winthrop. We just put 2 roof overlays on both elementary schools. So now perhaps in the eye of MSBA, did we buy ourselves a few years that they can say, oh, well, they're set for a little while now? And I'm worried that we're going to continue down that road as time goes on, because the second boiler at Winthrop could fail tomorrow. The boilers at the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School could fail tomorrow.
Right.
You know, and you know, they're beyond their useful life. So,
No, I think that's a good point. It's almost like, I say getting punished for doing, you know, the repairs and, you know, but that's exactly, it's a great point. Like,
Yep.
the more we do, the better it's getting, or the better it will, you know. So, I mean, you can't not do it, obviously.
right. But those are
it's interesting.
things that are specifically called out in the SOI application. We have to put, you know, when was the last boiler installed? When was the last roof work done? You know,
I think
things
that's
like
part
that.
of what we
So,
need to tweak, though, is that we need to say that was an emergency. We had to do that. And, you know, I don't think we should be penalized for doing the emergency things
I-
that we
I
have
agree.
to do to keep
Yep.
our kids
Mhm.
safe and warm and, yeah, it's tricky.
The other thing, it's, yes, I agree with you, but there are several buttons you can click for reasons that you're applying. One that we had clicked was the elimination of existing severe overcrowding. That
Doesn't change.
remains. I mean, so we still have a good case there. There's also, we hadn't clicked number 5, which I know the application changes a little bit every year, so I'm not sure if it's the same, but like, it's about replacement or modernization of school facility systems. So I think, again, we can tweak those SOIs and pull more, try to link more to how the education is being impacted, because it's more than just a boiler. I mean, it's a big piece, but
Mhm.
you have a lot going on that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think because there was such a heavy lift with this round of SOIs in terms of rewriting, we can really spend the time focusing on the areas to really illustrate those deficiencies and how it's impacting education, and maybe get some feedback from teachers too, to help give us some really specific examples.
Yeah, I think having quotes, or if you're able to, from teachers with even personal classroom stories of how the school is not sufficient, and even more so detrimental to their class, like have specific examples. I think that would be helpful. I think such a big picture, bringing it down to like personal experience.
So how do people feel about school facilities working group? Maybe reviewing the SOIs and kind of seeing which areas we need to focus to add stuff or rework, and then bringing that back to our group.
I think that sounds good. Had we been accepted, the intention was for the facilities working group to proceed with the next steps and put together the strategy. This would adjust that plan a little bit, but it was part of our original intent, so I think that makes sense.
Good.
I think if we're still talking about this, moving away from the application, in the meantime, can we inform the Ipswich residents about, I know there's still like, people are still talking about the one school versus two schools. I know something that we've learned, at least I've learned, maybe everybody else has known, that MSBA would only help finance one school.
One
At a
project.
time.
And one project, and the town would have to pay for the second school. You know, things like that. I think, you know, sharing more information with the public on what the options are, and, you know, so we can, it's just, everybody can make a more informed decision, because I know everybody's heart is, you know, it's a lot of emotions going into this issue. So if they have facts like that, and then they can really think about the money, is a big deal. Also, given the information that we've learned with our tours, do we have something, like, can we start working with an architect? I know we have no okay with the project, but is that something that we could do? No. Okay.
For the
Funding.
Yeah, for the first piece, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is it's that broader engagement with the town. We did that with the listening sessions and other
Yeah.
things that we've talked about. So I think that keeps going. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And the second piece, yeah, there's a cost associated with some of those.
of course.
I like the creative idea of in the same spirit, how do we continue to advance and engage the town? We should have to be mindful of where we might be spending money
Yeah.
on some of those and just be cautious there.
A reminder to get, when you have your pros and cons from the tour, to send them over to me. Pros and cons, ideas, whatever it is, I can put them in one place. So just remember to do that.
So I think we had been holding off on having a full committee discussion about really the pros and cons that we saw at the different schools, kind of what those visits taught us about trying to find our community's guiding principles. And we were partially doing that because we didn't want to sort of signal to the MSBA, maybe we haven't reached 100% consensus. We didn't address the two big elephants in the rooms as far as location and configuration and R3 and class or school size. So I wonder if that's our next step, is to have the 7 of us come together either in this forum, in a workshop forum, to say, did we advance on any of those things? And I think that we should look as far as what schools were submitted or approved and our submissions, and we can hear there were more needy schools, but is there something else that we didn't really advance as much as we really should have to show that we were ready for a project? So maybe just take a critical debrief, and I don't know what information we would need from the other accepted SOIs, or
Do we have access to those?
they're public,
They're all
Oh, they are,
MSBA, they should be.
or at least what schools were done. And, so I don't know, maybe we can figure out what additional information from the MSBA process, external of Ipswich, do we need to be able to look and to make it next year that we can, how are we going to, using that, how are we going to improve our SOIs?
We could take tours of those schools. Ones who are accepted.
The bad
What's going
ones,
on?
the ones that need, the
were
ones that need
accepted,
it. Yeah.
Well, I don't think we need to prove that our schools are in need. I think we need to start talking about what's the best
Our solution. Yeah.
I think we all know our schools need to be fixed. So yeah, I would love, very soon, maybe at our next meeting, to sort of start to discuss where we all stand as the 7 of us, given, the school tours we took, the listening session data we have, the report from the Loge group. You have that big spreadsheet of all kinds of different data that we can look at. Reviewing our SOIs that we submitted, and just sort of start to have conversations about, where are we in terms of where the 7 of us are, where the 7 of us are in terms of a solution, and are we anywhere near a consensus? And what can we do to move the community forward so that when we submit, we maybe have a little bit more of a direction.
The other thing we've never been able to really address is price. And I wondered, is that a place we would actually want to spend some real money out of school committee funds to work with an estimator to maybe update the proposals that were done on the failed project to say, if you're building a 775 school now, based on what your old plan was, this is what it would cost. If you're building a new school for this population and doing a renovation based on what was done before, what would that cost? Because we've never been able to go to the town with sort of a new estimate. And that, I think, hurts us as far as being able to show whatever our school committee preference or vision or solution is going to be, because we just can't attach a dollar figure to it.
And we could also look at schools that have been done completed in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I know we looked at 2 of the 3 school tours. 2 of them were roughly the same size, 450 kids, and they were both 60. One was 60 and one was 65. So I mean, if we look, and I'm sure that's actually all on Diana's massive spreadsheet in there somewhere, schools, that maybe could be updated with schools that have been done in the last 12 months. There might be, I mean, I know it wouldn't be the same design, but if we look at 4 or 5, 700 to 800 kids schools, and they're all, I don't know, 120, or, they're all within the ballpark, I think that would give us a pretty good sense too. But we're also the school committee, so we need to be having discussions about what's best educationally for kids, because it's not, it's the price tag, but it's also what's best for kids. And I think the other thing is this will align well with the strategic planning working group that's getting back together to look at all of the things in town, so we will get a pretty good sense of what else is, will Whittier be on the table? for our town to pay for. And so we'll have a sense of what else is in town and how this project might fit in, because that might steer us too.
Yeah, the other place, I guess, is in the FinCom and, asking them to, give us some projections of, if a single new school project is 8 years away, versus, a two-school staggered, potentially the town paying the second one, versus a new school with a renovation. Like, can they start to plot those out and what it would look like? Because those graphs were around in 2018, but again, they haven't been updated in so long that I just think not having some new estimates really hamstrings us.
Before we spend any money, I'd like to see where we are as a committee, because I don't want to be, I think that's good for us to start to have those conversations.
It's good, but I think it's also a bit of for me at least, it does feel like it's a bit of in a vacuum, right? I mean, sort of weighing those costs versus education. I mean, we just have that. We have to weigh those given the realities of what's happening in Ipswich. So, I mean, I have my theories, but if they're in a vacuum, I feel a little uncomfortable.
No, I don't think it's a vacuum. I mean, there's lots of data out there. There's lots of schools being built, big and small.
Yeah.
I think we could use that to directionally get to the cost. We know what the cost per square footage is for those new schools, as well as the cost for schools that are similar size for what we need. Use that to update the original numbers that you're talking about that we could do ourselves without an additional cost.
I agree.
Somebody else. So we got ourselves directionally. Maybe we're not within, thousands of dollars, but we're within millions, and we know approximately, we know the ballpark.
Right.
And I think that would address exactly what you're bringing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can do that. We can talk about that. We've got facilities next week. We can talk about how to get to those numbers and potentially bring that to whatever our full group discussion is.
At our first facilities meeting, subcommittee meeting, which was right after we found out the news that we weren't accepted into the program, my immediate reaction, and I said this was, I'd like to see those other SOIs that did get accepted. And I know that's work, and I know there's public access, but I do think it takes a request, right? Instead of digging, as you, because I think I would take that on as a subcommittee member. But I do think it's important to see what those other SOIs look like. Not that ours was deficient in any way, but just how many consolidated schools got accepted, how many smaller schools got accepted. I think that's important to know as we look to resubmit. So I would take that on, but I also don't want to be redundant if it needs to come from the chair or the superintendent. Do we ask the MSBA for those other SOIs?
I don't know the process, but if I need to, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I can reach out to MSBA and ask what the process is to get them.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought they were online, but you're looking it up.
I'm trying.
How do people feel about having these discussions about how we feel about about where we are at our next school committee meeting, or having more of a workshop about it? We have a lot coming up, just FYI.
If we can do it within the context of a regular meeting.
Yeah.
And maybe just give it enough time, but not dedicate 3 hours.
3 hours. Yep. Okay. So I would love it if people would review some of the data that we have to sort of come with a feeling on, I don't know, just for us to have an actual discussion on what we think might be a good solution, just to kind of see where we all stand, and then we can go from there. And then facilities will report at our next meeting also about, if you have some time, if you don't already have a full agenda, if you have some time to look into the SOIs. If not, we could bump it to later in February, our current SOIs, to what you think needs to be tweaked.
We just think we can talk about what package we can put together for the broader group ahead of the discussion. And then also, what else might we need additional time to prepare? Like, we might need more time to review the SOIs that were accepted, identify those themes. But we can at least come back and say, here's what we have versus here's what we might need some more time to prepare.
Okay.
Like the numbers, I think we could probably back into by our next meeting. We'd come up with some of those things. I just don't know how long it's going to take to review all that.
Okay.
Well, so the deadline is April, right?
Yeah.
To submit again. I think we need to define, if we're talking 2 weeks from now, talking about what Jeff mentioned, the elephant in the room and how we all feel going forward, how much data do we need in the next 2 weeks? And is that what you're asking for?
I think we have a lot of data. I just want to make sure people, because we weren't all on the committee when all that data sort of came in. So just refamiliarizing yourself with it, including our tours. Not that we won't gather more information along the way, but I think we have a lot of information.
So 2 weeks from now, we're not making a decision as to how to resubmit SOIs. We're talking about our collective 7 opinions about where to go.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think it's way too early to make decisions on.
And I was just thinking in terms of preparing a package, it was pulling together previous materials, not necessarily creating a ton, but particularly people.
Right.
Pulling together the previous materials just so everyone has a chance to read it.
Yeah.
Discussion. That's what I
Yeah.
was
And I can take that on. That's easy.
Okay.
Just putting them all in one place, making it easier for people to access. Yeah.
I was going to add, I can update the spreadsheets that I had made like a year and a half, or a little over a year ago, and add some numbers to them. And then separate from that, I think we're talking about 2 related things. One is, all of our opinions about the project in general, but you said April is coming. It's going to come fast. It came fast last year. I think that the first thing we need to do in facilities is come up with a timeline for what we need for the SOI, when we plan to present a draft, or, a process for that, so that we have plenty of time for everybody to review it, for, us to vote on it here, have the select board vote on it.
Votes and stuff too. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great idea to come up with like a map, timeline.
Executive functioning.
Saw the picture.
All right. Other comments on this? All right. So I think we have a plan. Thank you. All right. Next up on our agenda, behind as usual, Whittier School Building Project discussion. So as everybody knows, MSBA approved the Whittier Tech project to move forward at their December meeting with approved their schematic design. There is a district-wide vote on January 23rd in all 11 communities from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Polls are open to vote on this project. All 3 town boards, ourselves, Finance Committee, and Select Board, all submitted letters to Whittier expressing our concerns over the process. I know we've talked in this board about that we feel like we need to take a position on this project. So I do want to sort of open it up for discussion, and then I would like to take a vote this evening on supporting or not supporting this Whittier Tech new building. I'm happy to go first, or do you want to chime in?
I was just going to chime in briefly. I think that the school committee, as one of the 3 main boards in town, to vote on this is different from the other 2, in that your collective role is not just to be representing your constituents in the community, but representing the kids and doing what's best, what we collectively feel is the best for our students, and the education of those students. So there's kind of a different perspective. I think the other 2 boards can look at it from purely a tax dollar amount and the impact, but I think your role as a school committee is very different in that.
Okay. So I can go first. Okay. So I'm on this committee because I support public education. And I have heard some arguments online that, it's just 24 kids or it's just 28 kids. And so I don't really agree with that because I feel like every student matters and every student needs what they need and deserves the best education that we can provide them. And that's, like Dr. Blake just said, that's our job to, make decisions in the best interest of our students. And that includes vocational education. I do think they need a new facility. And I see the merits of a new building. A lot of what they do is around technology. And if you think, I turned 50 this year, so if you think of how far technology's come in 50 years, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think they're in a school that was built that long ago. So that's old. 50's old. So, however, I don't agree with the process and I'm frustrated. I think we're all frustrated with the process and I think we're in a tough position. I am frustrated with the timing. I'm frustrated at how we heard about or how we didn't hear about it for so long. I'm frustrated with the communication around the whole project and I think we're in a tight spot. However, again, I think we've felt the feeling of not being accepted by MSBA and losing out on a ton of money. And this, it's $161 million that MSBA is footing for this project. And, I don't feel like we can turn that down. And so I will vote to support this project, even though I do disagree with the process and I'm frustrated with the position that we're put in, but I will support this project. Anyone else want to go?
I'm happy to go next, or Jenny, you ready?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a no as far as supporting the project. As I've said before, I appreciate the value of different career pathways and realize that not every student goes to public school to go to college or to continue a different career path. And I think that Whittier and Essex Tech both offer a unique path that is very attractive and can be very lucrative and make sure that kids can go out and earn a living wage from high school graduation. My concerns are also on process and transparency. I think that the process issues have been repeated as far as communication, to boards, to constituencies, the fact that it was nowhere on our 10-year capital plan or 5-year capital plan. I don't know where that failure lies, but I feel as this being unanticipated puts us in a very hard spot with other improvements, including elementary school projects. And so for me, it becomes something where I can't support the 30-something million for Ipswich to put out without a plan about how are we going to address everything. So I think that they sort of need to ride together. And I don't feel that the current version aligns with that. So that's my concern. I do know that there will be repairs. I don't think that they're going to close the door on a future MSBA application. I think that there will be other times. And I acknowledge that in some way Ipswich is going to pay for improvements one way or another, but I don't feel at this time I can support this particular project.
So regarding the transparency, of course, and it's frustrating that they weren't proactive, or our representative wasn't proactive. We know that. And we did talk about as a school committee, and now is not the time, but creating requirements for this position to check in with us, whether it's every 3 months or, whatever, moving forward. And also, making a conscious effort of who is in that position, who will be much more transparent. So going forward, it will be, I would assume, better communication and transparency throughout with the project. So my concern, as I had emailed Kate about, is the information that the public has, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, there's going to be a bill to Ipswich either way, whether it's voted for or not. This is according to the tri-board meeting and the Whittier information. And according to Whittier, again, the repairs would be, what is it, $100 million more to repair and upgrade the current building. And that does not get any money from the MSBA. So that would all be on the district. Whereas if they build a new one, then there is millions of dollars from MSBA that's being given to it, and you're investing in a new building as opposed to investing in an older building that may have other things, soon. It's just my thought. But I also want to see more. I want to see the proof from Whittier. I know I just saw your email from Stephen Crane. And I know he's working on it, but I want more information on why they're saying it's going to be $100 million more based on their word. To me, I'm for a new building, but I do want to see the actual proof, because that seems a lot to do those repairs, but I don't really know. So I'd like to see actual quotes, that they received, that they were able to come up with, because they said what did they say? Our estimates. I want to know where they got those estimates from in terms of what the cost for the repairs are. So at face value, I am for a new building. I think investing in a new building, and it's cheaper to do that, is the way to go.
Just a note on that. While we haven't seen those numbers, MSBA, as we know, has a pretty strict process. And so I do feel pretty comfortable that MSBA has seen that information
Yeah,
of those estimates to bring things up to code, because that's part of their process. They need, they look at a new building, they look at bringing buildings up to code.
Right.
They have to that's part of their process. So I do feel like they've seen those numbers.
They decide what they're going to invest in, and they're saying basically this is not a building to invest in.
Right.
So they didn't provide.
Yeah, and it's more, they, feel like it's more cost efficient to build a new building.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to echo, I don't want to belabor the point of sort of the failure of process here. I think we've established that, and that seems to be ubiquitous across many of the districts that feed into Whittier. So at least we're not alone on that. I'm worried about what the cost would be to not do this project. I think that if one thing that we're learning is kicking the can down the road doesn't always produce a cheaper or better option. Even though this is an expensive project, the school I'm at recently estimated a project that a fairly similar dollar amount. And so I kind of understand that the new norm is unfortunately expensive projects.
For a vocational school?
No, this is just for regular high school, right? So vocational schools, you would imagine, be a little bit more expensive, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But from an educational standpoint, I think we're at a place now where, private colleges are now $80,000, $85,000 a year. I think this is something that we should be investing in. I think this is an important element of our society that we have neglected in recent decades, and that it would be beneficial for many students. And, we don't know the number of students right now who will make decisions to not go to Whittier because of the facilities. That's it's a what if, but a nicer facility might be more inspirational for some students to enter into that. I don't know, but I think educationally for me, this is something we have neglected, and I think it is something that I think we should be supporting, although I totally understand everyone's hangups on that because it really comes down financially. But I'm in support of the project despite everything else that, that has come out with the costs and everything associated with that.
Want to
Move
sit
it over to the table.
Do you feel the glare?
Doesn't have to be a big
Your
speech.
turn, show me to ask you.
Yeah.
I agree with everything Matt said, very much in line with my thinking. The only thing I'll add from a financial perspective, the new numbers that we got, the taxpayer impact on the average home value of 500,000 for the first few years would be $126. The next 27 years, 243. Based on what you're talking about, the 100 million to repair instead of if they build new is about a third of that. And so the equivalent to that would be, instead of 126, we'd be at around $40 for the first 4 years, and then about $80.
It's $100 million more.
No, to do the repair,
Yeah.
it would be, so if they did not, if the vote should fail, they would need $100 million to make the repairs.
It says,
That's
well, it
not
says
what they
100
said.
It says $100 million more.
They said it was going to be more.
For
They said
code
it's,
upgrade.
the project is
I'm just going by what they.
264 million-ish. They need 367 to do
Looking at
that.
their PowerPoint from a couple of months ago, I don't know how it could be 100 more to do just repairs, not full replace.
'Cause
Right.
It doesn't have the MSBA subsidy.
Reimbursement.
That
for
was
it.
just to bring it up to code, right?
Bring it up to, yeah, there's two major.
I don't know how it could be
repairs.
400
I
million
think
to
there's
bring
a
it up to
code,
code. That wouldn't make
there's a
sense.
base code repair, and then there's we're going to do the upgrades and repairs, to bring the building into the 21st century, type of repairs. And I think that's.
Right, I understood that just the pure repairs was 100 million, or that's what's in that original presentation. Now their numbers have changed, so maybe that's, but still that's.
So that's the question, is that like, I want to get, because that's a huge difference. $100 million
Yeah,
more
I think-
or $100 million.
I'll look back at the numbers right now as we keep going. My point is that
I would
there's
change
still
my
a
vote.
cost to do nothing from a taxpayer perspective. It doesn't go to $0 if we don't approve it. I think that's an important piece. Just purely an upgrade, not for a new facility. And it's not negligible. So I think that's something we need to consider.
All right. Yes, I'm in support of voting yes. As everybody else has said, the consequences of a no vote outweigh my frustrations with the process. A no vote, like everybody said, is just continued compromised education to the students and inadequate building. And also on the taxpayer side, I do think it will long-term be an increased cost to the taxpayer for Band-Aid repairs. I also think we know that a failed project is a lot of waste of time and money, and it's not easy to get back in.
I have, I've thought about this on so many levels for the town of Ipswich. I'm very much in support of technical education and having state-of-the-art buildings for those students to be in. I think I'm most frustrated with this contract that we were in since the 70s, and that even if this vote goes down in Ipswich, it is likely to pass because of the size of the other communities voting. And that frustrates me, because I believe from what I've heard of public opinion, I don't think this is well supported in the town of Ipswich. I do think tonight, having our sustainability officer, I'm sorry, I'm botching that title, and
I'm at resiliency manager.
I'm
It's
at
okay.
resiliency person. That was a refreshing example of coming to us for communication about grant application that could be affect the cost of busing later, because electric buses are more expensive, and they wanted our support to start a process. And I thought that was an excellent example of how the Whittier project should have started, with the end in mind of how much it could affect our citizens financially. So I'm having a really hard time with this, because I support education and Ipswich education. and this is hard to say, but I think I would support it as a school committee member, but I hope the citizens of Ipswich come out and vote how they feel, and how much this is going to affect their taxpayer dollars.
Jimmy, do you have any thoughts on this? You don't get a vote, but I'm curious to see if you have any thoughts.
I don't know if I know enough to really give a strong opinion on it.
No, it's okay. Was curious. Give you an opportunity. So,
Oh, sorry.
oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I think again, it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, like I said, but either way, even a no vote's going to affect the, and it's going to cost more money. And I agree with you, Jen, like the contract, and maybe we would have had time to, figure something out with a contract had we known this, months ago or whenever they started talking about this, which we should have known. But again, I don't say I'm going out on a limb. I'm just want to make sure, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that taxpayers will be paying either way. So we'll get a bill either way. And Sasha, we have to figure out what is the cost of those repairs. Is it $100 million more?
Or is it? I have their
just $100 million?
website.
Okay.
Do you have a time? I have it. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have the website up with their answer to that question.
Yeah, I'm reading the response they sent back from the questions from our recent tri-board meeting. It says our estimate, or that this, or the question is, if the vote fails, next steps. If the vote fails, Whittier Tech needs to immediately address the wastewater treatment facilities, move to installing sprinkler suppression system. That's the highest priority. It would force the district to be fully coded. It would cost the 11 cities and towns almost $100 million more for a code upgrade. But I'm reading that as $100 million on top of what we pay currently annually, not on top of the original estimates from the project. Is that what you have?
See, we need clarification on that.
Yeah, the website.
So the website seems to be a little more clear than that answer, and I'll read it verbatim. It's a very short, 2 sentences. If Whittier Tech does not move forward with the project, immediate infrastructure repairs will be required that will result in requiring Whittier Tech to complete a full code upgrade of the facilities and its campus. Since the code upgrade option is not deemed reimbursable from the MSBA due to not meeting the educational program needs from Whittier, the code upgrade is not reimbursable. The code upgrade option is anticipated to be $100 million more than building a new school.
That's a
And I have a,
Big
yeah, I have a
clarification.
different, it's the same, but it's different sentences, but same thing.
Okay.
So what this says, for a new school, after the MSBA reimbursement, the new school is estimated to be $267 million over 34 years of bond payments. Should the voters not approve new construction, Whittier will embark on a major renovation project to replace failing equipment and systems and bring the structure up to modern building codes. This work is estimated to cost $364 million over 41 years of bond payments. So that's the 100, the 267.
That's clear, because that's the one that's actually a dollar amount, not.
Right. But to
X amount
Jenny's
more,
point, or that 364 come from, we don't have that.
Right.
That breakdown, yeah.
Just going
But
by the-
MSBA has seen it.
Right.
Because that's part of their due diligence process,
Right.
so.
So I think it's people, perhaps, I know the people I've talked to, holiday parties, people are like, do you have 5 minutes? It was very popular. But the people wanted to pick my brain about Whittier and, and I was trying to explain to them like, well, it's too expensive. And, and I was like, but it's not, you're going to say yes and get a bill, or it's going to say no and you're not going to get one. So I was trying to explain to them at these holiday parties that it's, according to Whittier, going to be more expensive to vote no and have to pay for the upgrades and repairs in an old building. So that's where I stand as a yes.
I also think we should make it clear to the public. I did have one parent reach out to me who has a a student at Whittier. And there was confusion as to, well, if this doesn't pass, do we lose the contract and our Ipswich kids can't go to Whittier? And the answer is no. That is not the case. So whether we as a school committee support the Whittier project or not, it is not dependent on whether or not Ipswich students can go to Whittier. They will, regardless of this vote, Ipswich students will be going to Whittier in the future.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Thank you for everybody's thoughts on that. Could I get a motion?
I move to support the Whittier project. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, you could speak a little louder. It's
I
okay.
move to support the Whittier building project, school building project.
Second.
Moved by Diana, second by Jenny. Further discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? Sorry, wait, let's do that again.
Sorry.
Everybody
Yeah.
down.
My
Motion
hand
on
got
the
really
table.
heavy.
Put your hand up quick if you're going to say yes. Motion on the table with a second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so it's 6-1 in favor. Thank you. Okay.
Enough excitement for one night?
Thanks, Jamie. Good night.
Good night, Jimmy.
All right, so moving on to policy approval. We have in our folders a packet of many policies to be approved, and Diana's going to walk us through them.
All right. Okay, so we'll start with IMG. This one's coming back. We first talked about it in November. And Dr. Blake got some feedback from the animal control officer that we incorporated. Is everybody looking at the document or? Okay. Anybody just give feedback?
Did we run this by the animal control officer?
We did.
Okay. Did you just say that? Sorry, I was opening something else. Okay, thank you. I should have written my questions down. So dogs can't come into school. Like that's a change.
Dogs
Without permission.
Without
can
permission.
come, there, that's in the exception. Those exceptions can be made with prior approval.
With the star at the bottom. Is that what that is? Okay. Yeah, I think this looks good to me. That was my concern is do we keep the rabies stuff in? Should we run it by animal control? So
Right. She didn't like have anything super specific to say about the fur bearing animals. I had something that I wanted to add since our meeting, kind of because I think dogs are particularly, an animal that we're seeing.
Dog bites. Question might come up.
Sure.
Oh, I have two. One is I'm wondering if we can put in some language about like if a dog is going to come into school that it's house trained or however you word that. Like,
We can. I think that's an easy addition.
yeah, is that the right? Is there a better term than house trained?
No, I think that's the common
it's common term.
common term. Yeah.
Potty trained. Okay.
Look it up.
Potty training?
They don't go on
No,
a
not
potty.
potty training.
So
No, the-
they're not
the
potty
insurance
trained.
We're not there yet.
We're
That
taking a
question
left
hasn't been
turn
asked yet.
And no, I think the one that you're anticipating is Jeff had actually brought it up when we first talked about it about what are we insured for if there were an incident with an animal in the schools.
So the question came up about, if we do have animals in school, whether they be puppies or dogs or whatever, service animals or not, are we covered if there's a dog bite? So I asked Tom to take a look at that.
So the bottom line, and then sort of, work backwards a little bit, is we would be covered if the school administration, however we may deem that, superintendent or the principal, has given permission for the animal to be in school. If it's a little more loose than that or a little more haphazard, then we may be in some murky territory with the insurance company. But if there's a educational purpose and for the animal to be in school, and that is deemed by the administration what that educational purpose is, then any mishap, a dog bite or something other, some sort of accident would be covered under our policy. If someone, whether it's a staff member or a student, were to bring an animal to school without permission, and there's something, then that would really be on the parent or the owner of the animal.
So might I suggest we add the word on the top of where am I? Top of the second page. I'm in that exception paragraph. Exceptions may be made with the prior written approval of superintendent of schools. So there's documentation, like an email. Can I bring my dog? Yes, you may. I mean, otherwise it's just, how do you
acknowledge that you know?
Yeah.
How do you acknowledge that you
You're
know?
the-
True. Yeah, I just don't
I
want it to be
didn't
a
say it
big
was
formal
okay.
process. I'm going to
No,
bring my
like an
dog next
email,
Tuesday and
no,
have
an email, like
17
a-
sign-offs on it. An email would
And
be
you just
fine.
keep it.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of just
Yeah.
a verbal, because then if
Mhm.
something happens, we would have no,
Right. Yeah.
how do you know you got permission if it's not written down somewhere? No, not like
Yeah,
a big
no, I don't want a big
application
formal
process.
process,
just
yeah.
If we're saying they're prohibited, why would we then say there's exceptions that allow them? From a policy perspective. If they're prohibited, they're prohibited. Why would we make an exception?
Yeah, I would
if the
throw
puppy's
in
really
for
cute?
whatever it may be worth. What is the purpose of allowing an animal that isn't a service animal or isn't some form of, civil rights accommodation?
Mhm.
I don't mean to way out of my lane,
Yeah.
so I apologize if that's doing that, but
We
why would we do that?
we have allowed historically staff members to bring pets in as a reward time for students. People
Not on
aren't
a
bringing their
regular
dogs
basis, but
to
it's-
school every
yeah.
day, but it has happened historically, and I've always known when the dogs are there.
Is that, like, do other schools do that?
Yeah. This day and age, yes.
I'm okay with this as written.
Okay, and everybody saw,
If any,
sorry to interrupt, I tweaked that last
yes, I saw
paragraph
that.
under the exception. To your point, Sasha, is there a better word than, like, prohibited or?
Well, that's why I was originally asking.
No, not the language, more of we're saying we can't bring animals unless we say we can.
Yeah, yep, that, I hear that.
It's not the specific animals we're talking about or the process. It's
Maybe prohibited's too strong of a word, and maybe we say exceptions may be made in special circumstances with the prior, so we stress it's not like, can I bring my puppy every day for 12 weeks because I just got it and I don't have, that would probably not be approved. But if it was a Friday before vacation special, maybe that would be, I don't know. I mean, I think we have to leave it up to the discretion of the principals, but I want to be covered legally.
Maybe certain animals prohibited. And the policy speaks to wild animals or
Okay.
bats.
But it says fur-bearing animals.
Should we take out dogs and put that as an exception? Nobody's bringing cats, right?
I bet they
Not
do.
that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. So, right, if we take out dogs and then under exception, we have the first part about the
Yeah.
law enforcement and
Home, pet, I don't know.
pet, and then pet exceptions may be made for pet dogs.
Mhm.
So, I don't know why I laughed. Pet dogs as opposed to the.
It's the weightiness
Like
of
a
what we
service
just got
dog.
done talking
Wild
about. Now
dogs?
we're debating fur animals. You know,
Exceptions may be made.
How much,
it just feels a little.
they shed or do they not?
Are we
Hairless
overthinking
dogs.
this?
We're
Or-
overthinking this.
Yeah.
Pet dogs?
Very much so.
Okay.
I like that we have something light to talk about right now. though. All right. I added pet dogs. Does that read better? Sasha, does that feel better
Did you
for what you were
add it?
going?
Okay, other than being for pet, yes, I like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, KA, school and community relation goals, minor reformatting. I'm going to keep rolling. Just stop me if anybody has anything to add. KBA, school parent relations goals, minor grammatical changes.
Hold on one second.
Yep.
Oh, no, keep going. Sorry.
Okay. KBBA, non-custodial parents' rights, minor wording updates. And we did confirm that this is all current practice. KBE, relations with parent booster organizations.
I have questions about this one.
Okay.
So we're eliminating all of the bullets to enhance communication between parents and guardians. So all booster groups, and that includes Fry's, have the recognized upon request by the building principal who will file a copy of the organizational papers with the superintendent. So is that in practice right now?
Where are you?
First of the second set of bullets that's not
That's not deleted.
Okay.
crossed out. Starts out, organizations will be officially recognized.
So we did talk about this because we talked about who's a 501c3.
Yeah, and they're very few and far between.
Okay. Yeah, so there's like, to your point, Jen, a paper trail of Fry's being in existence, for example, and
So I guess my question is every booster group required to then be a 501c3?
if they are officially recognized, because if not, they're just
If they're
people.
working directly through the school, they should be, yes. It's a, so it's a gray area, and I will say, it's purposely a gray area because over-involvement of the school committee and the school district with the booster groups can cause unnecessary liability on the school district. So we try to maintain that separation. Now, historically, there hasn't been question with either of our Fry's organizations. In the past, there have been questions about some of the other booster groups. And so
My concern isn't of the current boosters that I know are 501c3s and operate, I think, very well. I guess my question is, there are smaller groups calling themselves boosters that are not necessarily designated, and it sounds like they need to go through a process. And is that what we are going to put into practice. That
We should, yes.
Okay.
It reads as encourages the maintenance of formal
So
organizations and boosters to do the following, is that right? It's the communications. The committee encourages the maintenance. Formal parent organizations.
Where do you see encourage? I'm sorry.
Paragraph.
In the main paragraph. Reading that right? That it's
Okay,
not-
committee
We're not saying
encourages the
these are
ma-
required to engage, but we're encouraging
Well, the
procedures be observed.
maintenance of formal parent, we're encouraging the maintenance of formal parent organizations.
Oh, so it's encouraging the existence, not encouraging the following these procedures.
Right.
The part that says for the purpose of the committee will officially recognize parent organizations. So are there organizations that are not officially recognized? And as such, if they're not, do they need to be 501c3s? Is that the designation, officially recognized versus not? I think I meant, that came up in our meeting, didn't it?
And I don't know that every booster or every group of parents that calls themselves a booster group is a recognized booster group.
But that's not really our problem if they're not coming to us for official recognition.
Which would absolve them of the need to be a 501c, wouldn't it? Or no?
Right.
Could I add
Yeah,
something?
you may.
This may or may not be helpful, but I can't sit here and not say it just out of obligation. A lot of what has driven the history of this is from School Business Managers, the Professional Association, and it has everything to do with the ownership of the resource, meaning the money raised. Because every account that's open must be open with a tax ID number. And what has historically happened across the state and probably across the country, because it's an IRS thing, the 501c3 is a federal designation, is that boosters have relied historically on the school district's tax ID number to open bank accounts. That's really what has driven this as a state policy matter. And with that in mind, there have been school committees and school administrators and others to talk about what can you spend money on? We didn't approve it. Who approved it? You can't raise money without being in sync with the school. If you don't have the school's permission, i.e. you're not formally recognized, then you can't lawfully raise money on the school's behalf and think you can spend it on something that the superintendent or the school committee doesn't want to buy. So that's sort of the very high, backdrop to how this started a handful of years ago. So the 501c3 designation is coming out as a very strong recommendation to have school committees officially recognize booster organizations as in partnership with the school district, that the projects that they're doing, the fundraising that they're undertaking is something the school district supports, the school principal supports, whatever administrative mechanism there is to that support. So the organizations aren't deemed as independent, going off and doing something that the school district doesn't want done. And then effectively, the 501c3 designation means that that organization exists legally. They can open a bank account, they can conduct business on its own, but yet recognized that its business is in concert with what the school district or the school administration wants. Hopefully that was succinct and not
That was great.
No, very helpful.
blanket on your.
No.
No, that's good.
In other words, we shouldn't, if I have that right, and correct me, we shouldn't allow booster groups to exist outside of that framework?
That would be my recommendation, because outside of that framework means that these booster organizations aren't authorized to conduct business on the school's behalf. without the principal's permission or the superintendent's permission or the school committee's permission, they're potentially raising money on the school's name. They're using the school district's name, or they're using the building's name, or they're using the town's name to raise money without permission to do so, or without an expected outcome. An organization could say it's going to go raise money to do something that the school committee may have decided it's going to cease the practice in doing.
Do we have the ability to enforce that?
I was going to ask that.
Well, the ability to enforce it, yes, through some copyrights, meaning you own the name Ipswich Public Schools. It's owned by the town and the people of the town, not by, so anyone that may use, we're going to go raising money on behalf of Ipswich Middle School, needs to demonstrate they actually have permission to use the name in their fundraising endeavor. Or the band, or the football team, or the basketball team, or whatever.
Or we could refuse a gift, right? If somebody says,
Or you
we've
could
raised money
refuse a
for new uniforms.
Right.
And we don't want them.
Right.
So back to our policy.
I know. I didn't mean to
I'm
throw
just,
it
no,
out
it's
there.
helpful.
that's-
It's
that's
super
very
helpful. And I think we need to look into it more, but I'm wondering how it affects, this policy before us right now.
I guess part of the beginning of my question of clarification is, it is the building principal who files a copy of organizational papers with the superintendent. So if you plan to be a 501c3 and you are an athletic organization calling yourself Boosters, it goes to the principal, the building principal, which goes then to you,
That would be the
organization.
process.
Okay.
I have just a request of the policy committee, if it's easy, like if you're going to delete big chunks of text, it would be helpful to just put like a quick comment in, if you can,
So
when you're doing it, like deleted this because it's in Massachusetts general law and like we don't need it here, or like we moved it to policy, blah, blah, blah. That just helps me because I get worried when we delete huge swaths of things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a reason, but
The-
it just helps.
usually it's
Okay.
because it's what the MASC policy manual has, and they said, I think for this one, like it was redundant.
Okay. I could see that a lot of them just say MASC updated at the end. But,
Are we ready to move on, or any more questions on that one?
I'm good. Thank you.
We're good.
Good discussion. All right. So we are on KBE. We're now on to JLD, School Counseling Program. So this one was actually deleted from the MASC reference manual, but our subcommittee recommends keeping it because there was the thought that it was important to have a document that describes the role of the counseling program for reference.
If we could just stay on this, do you have more to add to that, Diana? Sorry.
Not for that one.
So the part, I know I was on the sub-policy committee, but since then, what are the other, see it says, but not limited to the following. What are the other counseling topics that are under the school counseling program?
Besides what's listed here?
Yeah, because it says, but not limited to.
I think it just means it's not an exhaustive list of every single thing. Or that would be a lot. But I think it's.
I think it came up
imagine it's the
that
bulk of
gender
what they-
identity was one of the,
That was, I think, my misunderstanding of the word counseling. I think I was interpreting that as sort of writ large as part of the, social worker, when this is really referencing guidance counselors, right? So
Okay.
that was my mistake.
so this does not include gender identity counseling?
That wouldn't be the school's role. That's more a therapy role.
Okay, no, I know it came, I was dealing with my daughters as they were, and I had heard that, so that's not under this.
No, I led the group astray on that one.
Okay, and I heard
I threw
I
the-
heard that, but I didn't know. And what was the other question? It says the school counselors recognize that their primary obligation regarding confidentiality is to the students. So being that they're minors, except obviously the ones that are 18, what are the rights of the parent in terms of, are they able to sit with the student for the counseling, or they receive notes of the counseling sessions, or, because I feel like anything that's confidential should be clearly,
If you're if a parent is abusing their kid, they're not getting counseling notes of the counseling session.
no, but I mean, if,
That's
that's
a
example.
perfect, that's the example that I would give for that.
Right.
So there are, in a counseling session, in a counseling relationship, there are going to be things that a student is sharing with the counselor in a safe environment that aren't necessarily going to get reported back to the parent because it's not
Okay.
appropriate.
So I just wanted to be clear, because I get that example, but I do find it worrisome that there's some things that the kids are dealing with, or that are, again, being that they're minors,
Mhm.
to, as a parent, not have access to something that
So I
is
think
that important,
Yep.
But
Yeah,
they're
so
guardians, they're
Yep.
responsible.
No, that as with I can speak to this because my wife is a school counselor and follows the ASC model that this is based on. So in building the relationships with students, if one of the counselors would be having those conversations with the kids. Hey, I think we need to share this with your parents or your siblings, or they do the problem solving in school with other students if it's a student to student issue, things like that. So that's all part of the counseling relationship that the counselors have with the students and the families. Students aren't just going to counseling and having regular counseling sessions without the parents already knowing it. I mean, it might be a situation where I'm having a problem with a kid on a particular day and I go to talk to the school counselor. But if it's an ongoing thing,
Okay.
then the
parents
parents
will be
know
notified.
about that.
Okay, yeah, because
Yeah.
it says in the first paragraph, which is good, effort between the school counselors, parents, and other parents/guardians, it doesn't say /guardians, maybe it should, and other educators to create an environment that promotes student achievement. So the parents are included.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And that last sentence you were asking about, it says their primary obligation
Mhm.
regarding confidentiality is to the student. It doesn't say their only.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a key word there.
I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of protective orders in place in our schools, and we have binders of
Yes, right.
court orders and counseling obligations that
Well, that's,
take place.
yeah.
It's
no,
sad, but
Yeah, no, that's
true.
That
So,
makes complete
yeah.
sense. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
And Diana did just switch that to parents/guardians, so live editing.
I know, amazing. Careful what you say. It's going to be added.
That was JLD.
All right. JP, student gifts and solicitations. This one was recommended for deletion by the MASC, and we also are recommending that it be deleted because it does not describe our current practice. And there are other policies relating to like fundraising that are more applicable. All right. JQ, student fees, fines, and charges, minor reformatting. JRA, student records. We deleted the last paragraph per MASC, and also because that's not the current practice. JRD, student. Go ahead. Yep.
Sorry, I'm stuck on JQ. I just
Oh,
had a
JQ.
question.
Yep.
AQ.
JQ is the student fees, fines, and charges. Just didn't know if there was any discussion about the students who are indigent are exempt from paying fees. Is that like loose on purpose? Okay. I don't know if it was like qualifies for free and reduced lunch. It's just sort of subjective. Okay. It's fine. Thank you.
Okay. JRD, student photographs, minor rewording. JJIFR. So this was our other big one, although I think it's in a good place right now. So this was kind of a combining of a homegrown policy that was living kind of in athletics with an MASC policy that's really more of a protocol. So we had a lot of good discussion with the athletic director. And we use a sway test, which is different than what the MASC uses. And then the only piece of discussion that we had to follow up was there was some question if we had to do baseline testing with the sway test for all athletes or just contact collision sport athletes, because the MASC in the policy said like it's the law that you have to, but then when we contacted them, it's not exactly in the law. And so I think there is the feeling that what we are currently doing is sufficient. It would be an increased cost to test all athletes versus targeting the athletes most at risk, but we hadn't buttoned up that conversation since our last policy meeting.
That's defined somewhere. What's a contact collision sport?
Yeah.
What's that?
That's defined somewhere.
So
What's a contact
no,
collision sport?
it's not defined in
It's not-
here.
It's not defined, but we
It's
have a
not defined in
list.
here,
It's-
but it's a list.
Yeah.
It's defined somewhere. Like,
Okay.
And so this was run by the athletic director. Was it run by the Kelly? Why am I blanking
Yes.
on her title?
Yeah.
Sorry, trainer,
Yeah, the
athletic
trainer, athletic trainer, yeah.
Okay, great. Because they
Yeah. They do it, right?
said this is a long one.
Actually, Kelly, Tom, and Nikki all are athletic trainers.
Okay.
They all reviewed it together.
And it's consistent with what we do. Good.
Do any of the athletic registration documents need to be updated to reflect changes that are made here in the policy?
I don't think so. I think the policy needed to match what's happening, right? Versus the other way around. I don't think
There were a
any
couple of
changes.
pieces that Tom said, yeah, I like that. Let's
Oh,
leave that in
yeah.
there so that we'll make whatever changes are necessary to update that.
And that's a wrap on that batch.
Moving right along. All right. I get a motion to support policies in the folder for approval as edited.
A motion to approve revisions to policies as discussed.
Second.
Okay, moved by Jeff, second by Matt. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks. You're moving through those at a rapid clip.
Nice.
Great. Okay, next up on our agenda is discussion on a district-wide sustainability policy. This is, Diana's going to chat a little bit about this. This came up, I don't know, through some conversations with people, and so we wanted to float it to the committee to see what the committee thought about it, and then a little bit discussion about who, if we agree with it's something we would like to proceed with, who might get the ball rolling.
It's a great way to end our night. Had a lot of green conversations tonight, a lot of
sustainability
policy
talk tonight.
conversations.
It's good.
But we're not done.
So, right, like Kate said, I think we all are aware there's a lot of like effort and energy around town for sustainability, climate resiliency, all that good stuff. There's a lot of things happening in individual buildings, even in individual classrooms. So the idea is if we had a policy that's kind of our our mission. If we could harmonize those initiatives, make them more effective, make it part of the consistent education students are getting as they go throughout the schools. So, right, the first, and I hope everybody had a chance to look at the Framingham example. I think theirs is pretty awesome, and it's a good kind of template potentially if we decide to go forward with this that we could, tweak and make our own. So, right, the first is, are people on board? And then if so, my thought wasn't, oh, let's write this as a school committee and tell people what to do. I think it needs to kind of come from the bottom up, or be very collaborative with, building staff, administrators, students, school councils, green team volunteers, climate resiliency people. So yeah, what are everybody's thoughts?
I like it. I mean, I was involved in the very beginning of sustainability, or I don't know if this is the beginning, but very early on in some sustainability stuff here. And so this is like the people that I started to work with on that will be super excited about this. I like the idea of us taking some leadership on this, because I do think since the time I started that work, when I think my daughter was a kindergartner and now she's a senior, our goal was always to have it sort of be in the culture of the school. So we wanted to get things to a place where the kids were like, where's the recycling bin? Like where do I compost my food? And expecting that kind of stuff. And I think in a lot of ways we're there. So I would love the school committee to take some leadership on this. I think it needs to be pretty aspirational and not directive, because a lot of this stuff will trickle down to various departments, whether it's purchasing or Chris Rice facilities stuff, or, it could have lots of impacts. So I don't want to be prescriptive. I want to be, as much as possible, we'll do these, we want to move towards these things. I'd also be curious to run it by Rick Mitchell, because I think I found another town that had a townwide one that they were trying to do for the town and the schools. So I think it's great. I think Jeff and I both had the idea of seeing if students would be interested in starting to do some of the work on this, some of the sustainability students. So if you think that's a good idea, I think we could reach out to Lori LaFrance and see if any students are interested in doing some legwork. But I love it.
I like Framingham's policy. I just feel like it is broad, but
really broad.
Penetrates a lot. Like, how would we? This is a lot.
I wonder if it needs to be a little. Like this, theirs is a lot. It's like wind power, and it's very
Solar roof installation.
But I wonder if we come up with like 10 or 12 things to start that are that we could really move on. In some ways, this is so long. You kind of it's like a laundry list of all sustainable things. Ever.
Right. It's like
It's a little-
buildings
right.
down to like waste reduction and
But I love the idea.
How would we do that in a more reduced sense as a policy?
I say we throw it to the kids and see what they come up with.
Right. I think that's, again, if everybody's on board, I think we could, throw it to some students and Rick and, potentially some volunteers. And, because I'm not a professional in all of those things. I like the ideas of it, but I'm not professional nor the one carrying it out. But like Kate said, I think it'd be really nice also to take some leadership and have it be something that we all embrace in the district. So obviously, as I'm raising it, I'm happy to take on that leadership role to kind of reach out, or Kate, if you want to do that or work together on that. Is anybody not in support or have any concerns?
I think a lot of this we're doing. I mean, it's a fair amount of it. But I think, in my opinion, in my experience, it's pockets of good things happening, whether it's like a motivated parent group or a motivated teacher or set of teachers, or, the green team's really rocking it at this school, but it's kind of fizzling at this school this year, and then maybe it switches. So it'd be nice to have some sort of top-down aspirational things that we're all moving towards, but I think a smaller list, and it could be broken up maybe into different categories of,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to be deliberate about this actually should, I think, make it more effective.
yeah. And some of it I do think is pretty municipal too, so.
I mean, I wonder how much of it is overlap with the Green Communities Initiative as far as new municipal buildings anyway. And should we focus on things that are happening within our buildings with our staff population and with our student population first, as far as reductions that we can make that are not facilities related?
That makes sense. As Framingham Imagining has a lot more building projects, big or small, than
Right, well, they're
having.
much
And they maybe
larger.
hadn't adopted a citywide kind of initiative. So I think, I mean, there are some, ones in here just about idling, more vegetarian options, remote meetings as opposed to having staff, commuting. So just maybe like look at those things and see what are attainable by a group within the schools.
Yep.
And then maybe make a recommendation, understanding that's not the end, but that's just like the entry point to a policy.
Yeah.
And I know Rick Mitchell is working on, and so we have supported the zero carbon climate resolution to be, for the municipal buildings to be carbon neutral by 2040. And Rick has been coming up with an implementation plan of sort of how to make that happen. So this could sort of dovetail nicely with that. But yeah, I agree with Jeff. It'd be nice to focus in on things specific, that are achievable and specific to the schools that we're already doing, but then some other ones that we could, like I know you and I talked about, like minimizing use of plastic water bottles.
Yeah.
If there's sort of a policy around that, then maybe people would think twice about just automatically adding, 80 single-use water bottles to a sign-up genius and try to think of, are there other ways we could do that?
We could also contact, was it Acton Boxborough that had that school?
Yeah.
It's very efficient, energy efficient. They may have some really great, they clearly have building ideas, like for when they create a new building, but I'm sure they have other things that aren't just building related.
It's funny you say that, because I was looking at Green Communities and they got recognized for a Power Down initiative, something about turning off lights or something. I think there wasn't a ton of information on it. And I'm like, wow, they are really into that there. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Like an example, maybe, I don't think I've seen a rain barrel on this property. I might be wrong.
Right, I saw that rainwater collection.
So that
like,
might be, something. I know there's one behind the Winthrop School that
There's gardens
that
in
they
every
use.
building.
But, so that could be, I bet there is one by the garden behind here in the back. There might be one, but that could be something. Is that an important one that would be on the list for the students to say, oh, we're going to use rainwater? So
Manchester Essex has like this huge cistern that catches, I don't know if cistern's the word, but a huge, I think they call it a water wall or something. I mean, it's this huge, I think it's plastic, but it catches a ton of rainwater, and it's like a, tourist. It was like on the tour when I went and looked at Manchester Essex School a number of years ago, because they were so excited about it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I guess next steps, like, you want me to just start this? Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to reach out,
Okay.
I want to present it not like we're giving you another thing to
Right.
do, but like if there are students looking for projects,
Okay.
this
Yep.
is something the school committee is interested in, just to feel her out.
Okay. Start with her, and then do you think I should reach out to Rick Mitchell?
Sure.
Okay. And then
I think at the very least for
A good start,
awareness, he might have
Yeah.
good ideas of how to get started, or at least to stay aware of it.
Yep. And then for the, like, at the school level, is that something you want to take on? Do you want me to? How do you want to go about that?
I'm hesitant to ask the students to write a school committee policy for us.
I don't think it's writing a policy. I
Yeah.
think it would be like, what are your ideas? Like, what is
I think it would
something
be
you would wish to see? Like,
Ideas to
you know,
give them this.
I mean, I don't think it has to be a huge presentation. It could be like a bullet list, like, you should think of these, or, you know.
Okay.
In the
Yeah,
past, there hasn't
yeah.
been a policy, but we've done resolutions as far as wanting to reduce.
Plastic bag use and carbon
So
emissions.
It
the-
could be a
the-
resolution that we would do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
There also are three new students. The students aren't new, but they're new members of the Climate Resiliency Committee that came to our last meeting that were engaged and taking notes. And so I don't know what the plan is for them. I mean, I think they're going to continue to come, but we may be looking for ways to get them involved. So it could be through that somehow too.
Okay.
And
Is
Rick
that
goes to that.
better,
and I'm
or?
good to that.
I can talk with Lori.
You want to talk
Yeah,
to Lori
yeah.
first? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Because I
then-
don't know the specifics of how that class is run.
For the middle school and elementary schools, what is, like, do you want to, how do you want to go about, are you going to contact staff there or administration to see who would be interested in, again, just throwing some, like, brainstorming? Do you want me to do that? Do you want me to go to the school council?
Green team?
Okay,
Are they active?
yeah, super
I think
active, green
each-
teams at
each
the elementary
school
schools.
still does, yeah.
And is it headed by a teacher or a parent?
There's a teacher lead
Both.
and a
Okay.
parent kind of side that work together. I'm happy to do that
Okay.
if that feels like
You-
it's within the scope.
I don't know who the contacts are necessarily,
I-
but I can
I know I
take care
have
of it.
that.
Do you have that
Yeah,
already?
oh, yeah.
I think that's a good start, and then we could get more people involved as it firms up, and we need to, we need to run stuff by facilities or run stuff by. And again, it's not things that could be super enforceable. I think it's going to be directional.
Right. I'm just trying to get my head around, okay, so what exactly are we trying to do that we're gonna ask lots of people to get involved with? We have a model policy here. If a policy is what we're thinking of, are we collectively overthinking this and putting more?
Is this leading us towards a policy?
That would be my
That's what
goal.
we're thinking,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think, like you're saying, if we're going to say, okay, Framingham's the model, maybe not the building parts of it, then maybe that's where we start. Hey,
We
take a
just
peek at
whittle it
this. What would
down.
you
Yeah.
add? What would you take out? Because,
Yep.
the people
Most
in the
importantly,
buildings.
what can you do, right? I mean,
Right.
if we have a policy, but we're not going to implement it by spending a little bit of money to get, whether it's rain barrels or whether it's changing the fertilizers
But if we
that
have
we're
a
using
policy, then
outside.
that
Yeah,
could give the green team or someone else, ideas of ways to move things forward to support this policy.
Or work hand in hand. And also, like you said, like it seems like there's pockets. Like I think there's things happening in different buildings. Like even when I talk, like as a parent, I'm like, at that building that's happening. Like I wonder. And then like, but at your building you have this, and it'd be neat to just kind of be like, this is how it works here. Like we could do that there, vice versa, whatever.
Would the green team, would that be a liaison position for someone on the school committee to be working with the?
I don't think so, because it's more like a,
There's like
Smaller
several,
project.
smaller
Happening,
green teams.
yeah.
Yeah.
each building has one.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to reach out and kind of see what people are thinking and report back. And so you will reach out to Lori LaFrance.
I'll get
on
to
that
Lori,
end of
yep,
things. Okay.
yep.
Great. Thanks, everybody. It's exciting.
And I can bring
Thank
it up
you.
at climate resiliency next time too.
Okay. Great.
Because a lot of this stuff is what they're trying to do anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okey doke. We are through our presentations and ready for your superintendent's administrative report at 9:38.
It's been a while. December 7th was our last school committee meeting, so happy New Year to everyone. Since our last meeting, I met with Chris Race regarding the capital plan and budgeting and reviewing all of the projects that were underway at that point in time. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. I'm continuing to work on school security behind the scenes. I completed a workshop on the standard reunification method, and a seminar is upcoming on the use of safety glass in schools. I met with Nicole Jardis and Brian Dozer regarding the booking of our school facilities, particularly this building, our fields, and the Performing Arts Center. We're looking to update our documentation and our fee structure. Some of the information in there is outdated, and we just want to put some better guidelines in place, and any of that will come forward to the school committee for approval. There were a lot of subcommittee meetings before the holiday break, including the FEFI working group, school facilities, communications, and policy. I attended as many of the winter concerts as I could. And I mentioned this in my shout out earlier tonight, that the talent of our kids and the educators just never ceases to amaze me. And it's fun to be able to send the links out for the concerts, and literally to have, my daughter and her husband in Maine and my sister and her family in New Jersey watching the concerts and being able to comment on them. It's pretty cool. So I've also been meeting with the town manager and the folks completing the energy conservation audit, NORESCO. And it's interesting, some of the things that were in that previous policy, I smiled at, because some of the recommendations that they're talking about are things like putting, the solar carports on our parking lots here at the middle and high school. So that's one of the things that's being considered. So continuing to actively engage in those conversations, and there'll be a final report forthcoming. North Shore Education Consortium has had a couple of meetings to review and vote on a budget and tuition increase in order to make repairs to one of their buildings. We'll be able to cover that increase in our budget this year. Speaking of budgets, I met with Stephen Crane, the town manager, to talk about the capital budget, as well as some items that we're going to need to start carrying in our budget moving forward, including snow and ice removal at the schools and a larger portion of the climate resiliency position. And so Tom is aware of that and is working that into the budget for next year. All the budgets have been delivered to Tom. We're currently putting those budgets together. We'll then be meeting with the administrators to review them and, look at the bigger picture. Early indications suggest we're somewhere in the 5% range, which we got to whittle down. An update on the buildings. Chris Race has indicated that all the roof work is 100% completed. There was a small leak due to a nail that was identified and is being repaired. Overall, the roofs have held up very well. They were certainly put to the test with all the storms that we had prior to vacation and then during vacation. The new boiler is up and running at the Winthrop School. There's a company that's still working at the school because we have to have a water treatment piece on that new boiler so that we don't end up with the corrosion issues that we had with the previous boilers. So they're still working that, but the boiler is fully functioning. It's been inspected and is good to go. We had a leak in the sprinkler system here at the middle school that caused some minor damage over the break. It was caught early and a temporary repair was made. Eventually, we're going to have to replace that pipe, but that'll require a vacant building and shutting down the whole system. So right now, the system is fully operational, and we're hoping that repair holds. As you know, and we talked about this, we're not invited into the MSBA process. Collectively, we're going to have to decide how and if, I'll put that out there, we want to move forward. The next round of applications opens up in a couple of weeks and then closes in April. I had my holiday luncheon with the central office staff and then a dinner last night with the administrative team. It's nice to get together with folks I work closest with outside of work. I think we had a good time. It was fun. Tom Gallagher and I met to review the athletic program again, for the wrapping up the fall season and talking about what's happening now in the winter season. We have an advisory committee meeting scheduled for next week. I met with the IEA for our monthly meeting the week before break, as well as several parents and staff members. The Compass Committee continues to meet, unpacking and organizing the comprehensive health and PE standards that came out. It's one of my goals. Meeting in small groups over the last couple of months. Next week, we're starting to bring it all together. We hope to settle on one format for the document moving forward. As a reminder, the goal this year is to unpack that, the standards and organize them by grade level and span so that we can begin to take a closer look at where the gaps are. And we do this with every curriculum review cycle. Once that's complete, we can then have the staff start building the necessary units for next year and make budgeting requests for the following year so that they have the materials to implement. Last but not least, my work in diversity, equity, and inclusion continued with another session with the superintendent's group where we focused on 2 additional case studies. And I also participated in the Culture Fest at the high school, and we've had several DEI meetings district-wide, continuing the No Place for Hate work. That's all I got.
How was the Culture Fest? I meant to go to that.
Yeah, so the Culture Fest, we for the first time doing it was incredible. Very well received by the kids. A lot of participation. They did it during our block during the day, and it was just for the students and staff. They're talking about doing another one in the spring that maybe we can do outside and open it up a little bit more. Some of the logistics were tough. People didn't know what to expect, and so there was some hesitancy on the behalf of students getting involved or staff getting involved. But overall, the feedback from it was great. They filled the cafeteria with students and staff presenting, whether it was food or history or different information about their culture. And the freshmen and juniors went through during one part of time, and then the sophomores and seniors went through a different time, and then they had some I'll call them breakout sessions and discussions in the pods with those individual groups, either before or after they went into the Culture Fest, so depending on the group that went, talking about identity and things like that. It was the feedback that the students had to share was yesterday. We debriefed in the district-wide DEI meeting, was very positive, very supportive. So,
Questions for Dr. Blake? Thank you. Subcommittee working group and liaison reports. I'm not sure. We had the holiday, but it's been since December 7th.
We had Feffy's.
Yeah, it was, I think
We had
Feffy's is meant
Communication.
between, I think.
Yeah.
One other one that I said.
Feffy's, we had a lot to undo because I think that was the first time we'd had a chance to kind of meet since we had had a larger meeting with some of the previous members of the school committee who kind of gave us some background history on, sort of intent around what the paying grant process was all about. And they gave us some food for thought. And I think we still have to work on what that all means for us. We did want to sort of get some short-term things done, and I think we have a meeting next week. Jeff was going to help, or at least kind of come up with a draft around reporting systems for paying grants that we thought might be simplified, that wouldn't be terribly onerous on the teachers and admin, whoever got the grants, but would be enough for us to be able to promote them and share them and disseminate them in a way that everyone could see what the good that was being done by this. So that's what we did. The only other thing too is there were some questions about TWIG grants and the money getting there. Has that been solved to our satisfaction? All right. I was going to add that to our next conversation if it hadn't been done.
Thanks. Do you have what's the time? I don't know. Or what's the timeline for a proposed changes to that policy? Just by the end of this school year, I thought we were looking
For this cycle.
For this, okay. So sooner rather than later, but small changes, but then there will be bigger changes to come? Or
So the reporting form for this cycle,
yes.
the policy, DDA, before this cycle, or,
I don't know.
yeah.
Is it
That,
three of
that
you?
would be in May. That we would have to have that done before those votes come
For the
to us.
next
So
cycle,
I think it's reasonable.
Had a lot of philosophical discussions. It's hard to capture that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Thanks. Other groups that have met?
Facilities met. Lots we've talked about since. We talked about the MSBA decision, which we've covered here, so we'll go back to that. We discussed school safety. Brian talked about a little bit. The one other highlight we had was the Raptor system. Verifying entry is now up and running in all 4 schools. And then we've sort of kept an ongoing discussion of any active or upcoming school facilities projects, the roof boiler being the main ones, but we've covered a lot of that here. Those are the 3 main topics we covered.
Communications.
We put out a newsletter, a
Yeah.
very brief newsletter right before
Yeah.
break.
yeah, we
then
had that
there's-
mini meeting, and then we're gonna meet again and try to get back on our schedule.
Anyone else? No? Good. Great. New business? Seeing none, vouchers and bills should be all set. I don't see a consent agenda in our folder,
No,
which means,
that we'll have to approve the meeting minutes at the next meeting.
okay. I was going to say, which means I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Diana. Second by Jenny. All in favor? All right, we are good. Thank you very much. Good night, Ipswich. Thank you.
You Saturday Night Live.
Bring it
I'm
in
going to
on
mention
your
it every
phone.
time until it happens.
What is that? Q Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
You know, the end with the saxophone. We should all like get in the front and hug each
Have a-
other.